Thank you, Julie. Hello, everybody. Buenos tardes to my friends in Aguascalientes, Mexico. We have a number of people from all over the world. It's great to be with you. If you were with us last session, this quick review of what we covered hopefully will be at least a bit of a reminder. And if you missed it last time, it's all good. We started with what was then last week's Parsha, the Torah portion of the week, where the first thing we learned on the way out of Egypt, aside from miracles happen and waters part, is that God identified God's self as our, quote, healer, our Rofeh. It's the first thing we learned. So our relationship with divinity from the very beginning in Exodus 15, we got water, we got manna, we got healing, was started off on that foot. But the second you put God and healing in a room together, you end up with some complexities. Why do people get sick? Do people deserve to get sick? If we deserve to get sick, what does that mean? If we don't deserve to get sick and God is our healer, what does that mean? This is a bit of a spiritual leveler. We all get sick. We're all in it together. And so our first class sat in the teeth of those philosophical and theological questions to the point that folks in the room started to do that, Bernie sitting in their seats like this. Because one of the things that illness does is it puts in stark relief what our spiritual life is, or what we want our spiritual life to be. And as if to put a fine point on it, we looked at a text by Rav Nissen in the 1300s, where if we believe that things that happen to us are what's supposed to happen because we deserve them, then surely the Black Plague or the Black Death of the 1300s came because we were not following Torah. And a bunch of us really took on that Bernie pose. We talked a little bit about how we hear that same kind of thing now. The hurricane hit South Carolina because. COVID happened because. We have a lot of views, we imperfect, inconsistent humans. But if we lift one level above the particularisms, the details of what people say they believe in tradition, we can agree on this. It's about making meaning. That there's this drive to make meaning of our lives, to make meaning of the lemons that come, whether they are sent by God or we just trip onto them, to turn them into lemonade in some way that is emotionally authentic, spiritually authentic, that reflects the human condition. And so for that, we looked to King Hezekiah in Isaiah 38. The prophet Isaiah says to him, "It's over for you, you're going to die." And he turns to the wall and he pours his heart out. From this came the famous midrash we learned last time. That Hezekiah says to God, hey, God, it's not so good if people are healthy their whole lives. They won't turn to you in longing, in yearning, in trying to make meaning of their lives. And God famously says in this holy story, hey, Hezekiah, you're right. And I'll start with you. And that's where we ended last time. Not with the question, why do people get sick spiritually, but rather, what do we make of the quest for meaning in illness? And maybe that quest for meaning is what we begin to mean when we talk about healing. That is what marinates our hearts, marinates our souls in this journey that we can't actually give a clear answer to, but yet we're all still on, especially now when we've exceeded 450,000 in the United States who have died from COVID. So where we're going to go now is what spiritual life looks like in the shadow of illness. We're going to look at a very famous story of a pretty boy named Rav Yochanan, who was very pretty and very young and super, super sure of himself. And then he gets sick. And what happens? We'll look at what the sickbed has to do with the sacred. We'll look at the experience of Patriarch Jacob, Patriarch Abraham. And we're going to look at ways of understanding and maybe sensing the divine presence amidst our illness. And we're going to trace an arc from Abraham all the way to the Piaseczna Rebbe in the Warsaw Ghetto. And we're going to attempt to do this in 51 minutes. So everyone take a deep breath. And let's go. This is the story of Rav Yochanan bar Nafcha. He was one of the first of the rabbis that is recorded after Yehuda HaNasi, after the second exile. It is said of Yochanan in this piece from Talmud, and this is him talking about himself. I am the only remaining of Jerusalem's men of outstanding beauty. Like, this is a guy who's really full of himself. How beautiful is he? The Talmud comes and says, if you want to see how beautiful this guy is, this is back in the day, so imagine making this modern. Take a silver goblet that's coming right out of the heat of the fire, put beautiful red pomegranate seeds, encircle its brim with chaplet of red roses, put it in the sun. Its lustrous glow is like Reb Yochanan's beauty. It's like people's top 50, right? This is a beautiful person. So beautiful was Yochanan that in the days when it was imagined that what we surround ourselves with could affect how we are, he would go and sit by the ritual bath, the mikveh, which is a no-no nowadays. But back then it was somehow imagined to be okay. And the daughters of Israel in exile would go to the mikveh. They would come out of the mikveh and theoretically they would see this beautiful guy. And then they would bear children as beautiful as him. Now we're all looking at this and going, what were those rabbis on when they wrote Talmud? I'm with you. This is a little sketchy and skanky. I share this story because it's the backstory for what happens next. This is the same guy now who's going to have an experience. And we're going to turn to the first piece of Talmud in the Masechet, in the book of Talmud called Brachot. And here's what happens. Yochanan's deep connection in learning Chia bar Abba becomes sick. In Aramaic, chalash al gabeh. He's literally weakened on his back. And Yochanan says, in this whole long chapter about why do things happen to us, are your sufferings beloved to you? And Chia says to Yochanan, neither them nor their reward. Like, I don't want this. I don't want whatever I can get from it. Don't try to tell me why I get sick. It's good for nothing. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. There's no meaning. So Yochanan says to him, give me your hand. Chia gives Yochanan his hand and raises him. Talmud uses words very deliberately. Suddenly, it doesn't say heal. To raise. That there's something about not sick, or at least heal, that is not about cure necessarily. Several people talked about that last time, that healing is not necessarily about cure, but about elevating us, raising us in some way, even if we are still physically ill. That's why we traditionally will look at this next time, pray for refuat nefesh, the healing of spirit, before we say refuat guf, for the healing of body. All right, episode 1. Episode 2, look who gets sick. Pretty boy. Pretty boy, Yochanan, now gets sick. His teacher now comes to him and says to him, Chaviven alecha yisurim, are your sufferings beloved to you? Same thing that he had said. And he gives the same answer that Chia had given a minute ago. Neither them nor their reward. Same thing. Give me your hand, and he gets lifted. But Talmud comes with a question. Why couldn't Yochanan raise himself? He had just raised Chia up, so why couldn't he raise himself? And one of my favorite lines from Talmud now comes. Why could Yochanan not raise himself? In chabush matirat momi beta asurim. No prisoner can release oneself from prison. No prisoner can release oneself from prison. That as much as our self-empowerment language valorizes the individual journey, my thoughts, my feelings, my experiences, we are in community. We are not on a spiritual path individually. That there's something vital about connectivity between people. In fact, it's only connectivity that ultimately releases us. And that release is the definition of healing here, and it cannot be done for oneself. This was an idea that is at least 1,500 years old. 1,500 years ago, we were saying, Ein chabush matir atzmo bibeit ha'asurim. No one can release themselves from prison, which kind of makes sense. You literally need to have the key inside and go outside the cell and twist the key. Makes no sense. We are each other's keys. Hang on to that idea, because now someone else is going to fall ill. Now, if it's going to be the same old story, Yochanan will now go and say, hey, your suffering's beloved to you, neither them nor their reward. Give me your hand, lift them up, end the story. But not after Yochanan has experienced being sick. Pretty boy has gotten sick. Pretty boy has experienced suffering. Pretty boy has experienced the vulnerability and the sense of being freed, of being helped, of being touched in some way. And so instead of simply going to that, now the Talmud says something very different. Yochanan saw that he, Eliezer, was laying in a dark room. He started to see what was in front of him. And Yochanan bore his arm out, and light radiated from it. That didn't happen last time. And Yochanan saw that Eliezer was weeping. He sees, he hears this light coming, and says, why are you weeping? And he comes up with all these different reasons why you might be crying. It's because you didn't study enough. It doesn't matter if you studied so much or not. Are you hungry? Well, not everybody's rich. Not all people merit 2 tables. That's their metaphor. Do you lack for children? Hey, says Yochanan, I had 10 children. Here's the bone of my 10th child. I have now suffered. How many of us have lost? This is right on the nose. He's trying to figure out, why is Eliezer crying? Because now he actually cares about the person's inward experience. Because Yochanan has suffered. Suffering in many instances, not always, but many instances, becomes a way for us to learn empathy. Becomes a way for us to become more human. Someday, God willing, we won't need to learn the hard way. But Yochanan did. And having been sick and having been lifted, he now has eyes to see. He now has a heart that can feel. And now he's hurting for Eliezer's hurting, and he's trying to figure it out and reason Eliezer out of hurting. And Eliezer says, no, I weep for your beauty, Yochanan, that will rot in the earth. You still think you've got the answers, huh? And I see some faces that are just laughing on this one. Yeah. And Yochanan says, very comedic, yep, for that you have cause to weep. And the 2 of them weep together. And only after the 2 of them have sat together crying does Yochanan say to Eliezer what you're expecting Yochanan to say to Eliezer. That happened twice already in episodes 1 and 2. Are your sufferings beloved to you? He says to him, Lo hen velo sachran, neither them nor their reward. And he says, Hav li yadech, give me your hand. And he raises him. This is the story of someone who felt that, and this is the story of youth, if you think about it, that they're invulnerable. Oh, it can't happen to me. And when it does, we suffer, and no one should have to suffer, God forbid. And yet, with those tart lemons comes empathy, awareness, knowledge of what's more important in the world. Not because we should suffer, but because the suffering teaches us something. This story is, in Jewish text, famous. It's used to teach chaplains how to chaplain, and also some things not to do. Why are you asking so many questions? Let them talk. about empathy, about compassion, about having the bravery to feel and cry with someone. That sometimes the most important thing you can do with someone who's suffering is not try to talk them out of it, but to be present with them when they are, especially amidst a disease that we can't yet cure. We can't yet fix it. But cure is different from heal. Healing means something else. Why this story? And why in the very beginning of Talmud? This isn't a footnote, this isn't later. This is how Talmud pretty much starts. Just like we met God on the other side of the sea saying, hi, the way you're going to know me is as your healer, the one who lifts you up, not necessarily the one who cures. Very different understanding. The story maybe comes because everybody gets sick. That illness casts a shadow on all of us, even Pretty Boy. It's highly lowercase d democratic because it modulates illness, modulates our sense of power and our vulnerability as almost nothing else can. Because it arouses a subtle self-defense to other people's suffering, or alternatively, profound empathy for people that we care about when they are suffering. Because this story isn't about praying for people. This is about touch, literal or figurative. This is about connection. It's about relationship. And it changes the subject completely away from why is this happening to me, which is what we saw last time, toward it doesn't matter why it's happening. That ultimately, at least in this strand, the Jewish path of illness and healing is not about, did you deserve to get sick? It's, you're suffering, be there. We're never going to puzzle our way through the theological maze. We're human. It's like trying to take a thimble to hold the ocean. We're not ever going to fully understand. So Judaism sort of changes the subject on this one and says, far more important than figuring out why is to be there for each other. Judaism very much focuses on the here and now. And yet, here's this inner light of healing. We've got this very practical notion on the one hand, and now a mystical notion on the other. And we're going to come back to that inner light in just a moment. When we are aware of that way of being, that it's about being present with a capital P, and for those of us that might be mystically inclined, to imagine that we have a light, whether it's literal or metaphorical, doesn't matter. But when we're in that sense of awareness, we're going to see things we didn't notice before. We're going to hear tones of voice that maybe we didn't appreciate before. We're going to feel that marinating of the heart and the spirit is what this journey really is about. In that understanding, the inevitability of illness in our lives is a bit of a descent, tzorech aliyah, for the sake of ascent. That our lives are a little bit like a roller coaster. Does anybody feel like they're on a roller coaster these days? Yeah. That we go down, not for the sake of loving the down, but that we learn, or that we can aspire to learn in that turn, so that we can bring up greater awareness, greater gratitude. And it doesn't make the descent fun. We miss our families. For those of us who haven't been able to travel to see our loved ones, that's real. For those of us who have been sick, that's real. For those of us who have loved and lost, that's real. None of this is to take away any of that. It's to aspire to make meaning in whatever way we can in the wake of the inexplicable, and to say that healing is the uplift of hope, of yearning, of presence, of comfort, of compassion. And that when we go down, maybe we lose some of the covering over our hearts. And that's what we aspire to do. That is the Jewish path. But it doesn't answer the question, what is this light of healing? It doesn't answer it. Our rabbinic ancestors, being rabbinic ancestors, wrote a whole bunch of things about what this light is. And it traces a lot of the discussion we've been having already. Is this the light of merit because you've been doing good deeds? Well, does that mean that if you didn't do good deeds, you don't have the light? Does that mean that good people don't get sick? Oops, there it is again. Is this people who have faith? There are faithful people who get really sick and seemingly unfaithful people who don't get sick. Although I bet we all know someone who didn't feel like they were faithful until they got sick. As the old story goes, there's no such thing as an atheist in a foxhole. But there's something about this journey that transforms us. There are some of us who believe that we are made B'Tselem Elohim. I'm going to stop the share for a second so we can look at each other. That we are made B'Tselem Elohim. We are made in the image of God, whatever that means. But God doesn't have a shape, a form. What God is in that understanding is not on the physical level, but on the spiritual level. A light might be our metaphor. Breath might be our metaphor. Idea might be our metaphor. Energy might be our metaphor. Goodness might be our metaphor. Our words are going to fall apart because that thimble of our awareness can never hold the infinite. But our ancestors used light as a metaphor. The light that they're talking about is the light that we come factory installed with, whether we believe it or not. I'm checking the room out. I'm looking at us, and I'm seeing the following faces. I'm going to sort of accentuate them just for conversation. Some of us are going, right on, brother. Yep, I feel that light. I feel God's presence. I feel the spark of the sacred in me and other people. I have felt it. I have seen it when I held a baby, when I saw a sunset, when I said I do. I have felt it. I see other people looking at me like this. What? They didn't teach me this in synagogue. They didn't teach me this in day school. They didn't teach me this. What? God's a light? This is Talmud. This is not the woo-woo book. This is Talmud. And the beginning of Talmud at that. And over and over and over again, this allegory of allusion to light keeps coming back. The burning bush, the pillar of fire, the Ner Tamid, the Shabbat candles, the light of creation. Over and over and over again, our sacred texts trying desperately to depict the undepictable brings us this image for the one that has no image. And it's light. Becky writes, I thought the soul was the image. Our language is going to fall apart. It has to fall apart because the finite can't hold the infinite. But B'Tselem Elohim literally means the image of God. But God has no image. And the brain goes. Sarah writes, yes, Torah itself begins with God pouring light over creation or making creation out of light. The first thing God says in our sacred narrative is, Yehi, let there be light. But if you look really carefully at Genesis 1, Rabbi Brad Artson of Ziegler in Los Angeles does a beautiful job of bringing this up. When God began creating the creation, Ve'aretz hayta tohu vavohu, and the world was a mess, a jumbled void. V'choshech al pnei tehom, and darkness was on the surface of the deep. The Ruach Elohim, and the Spirit of God, the divine Spirit, merachefet, fluttered like a dove al pnei hamayim, on the surface of the water. Uh-oh, wait a second. That means that before light was created, there was a jumbled mess, and darkness, and a surface of a deep. Light then comes to create order out of that, to create hope out of the darkness. But pre-existing everything is a jumbled mess. Physicists might call it entropy, or what happens to my closet. Things become a mess. Bodies break down, things fall apart. Entropy is the state of our universe. Light, energy, God, flow, healing is what now comes forward, not as a cure, but as a transformation. Ellen Wool writes, what was the reward of sickness that Eliezer, etc. mentioned? They don't tell us. Isn't that fascinating? Are your sufferings beloved to you? Was the question. And the answer is, shut up. Neither them nor their reward, whatever they may be, doesn't matter. It's like, don't ask me about why. When someone's in the hospital bed, when someone, God forbid, has COVID or anything else, the last thing we want to think about, but often do because we're human, is, why did this happen? Why did this happen to me? It's natural that we do. And this story comes along to say, we're never going to be able to answer that question. So let's answer a different one instead. It's not about valorizing suffering. It's about connecting with our tears and our hands when we can, and our hearts always. Thank you for those questions. Yes, there is no light without darkness. There is no ultimate healing unless there's sickness. I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to try again. Here we go. Can everybody now see the screen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So here's a question for us. I'll ask it again. Can we experience that light? Is this just an idea? I'd love to see in the chat box if anybody has ever experienced this light. It may be a literal light, it may be figurative, it may be a sense. What does it feel like if you've ever experienced this light or wanted to experience this light? If you've ever experienced something like this, I would love it if you could throw it in the chat box. When my daughter was born, yes, I have felt it in health, I have felt it in sickness. So a few people are starting to knowing a rightness. Someone writes about a near-death experience and they saw light. Look at all these questions. Someone talks about Reiki. Someone talks about a tunnel of light when they die. Redemption of the soul. Here come all of those beliefs and theologies. They are right there. And other people say, no, what are you talking about? So to people who have not experienced this, no, you've not come to the wrong place. Here's my question. You ever had someone bring you soup? Have you ever felt cared for? When you've prayed for a relative, when you've prayed, the calm that you get after you cry, this light, this comfort may take any number of forms. We're all wired differently. No wonder we have so many texts. We're not a people of the book. We're the people of the library. We have so many ways of being. We're wired in lots of different ways. For those of you who have experienced this light in one way or another, or an aspiration or a hope or a connection in some way, you can hyperlink your experience directly to this story about Reb Yochanan the Pretty Boy, the very beginning of Jewishness and Talmud. There are a lot of people who are going to have some comments. Just in the interest of time, what we're going to do, everybody, is try to hold them until the end and see. I know there's well over 100 people in the room. So here's what happens more likely. This is the story of Israel, whose other name is Jacob. He calls his son, Joseph, of the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and says, if I found grace in your sight, make me a promise. Back then it was you take a hand, you put it under the thigh. But make me a promise. Please do what I'm asking. This is really important to me. Do not bury me in Egypt. They're now in Egypt. Let me lie with my fathers, my ancestors. Carry me out of Egypt when you go out of here, and bury me in their burying place, the cave of Machpelah. And Joseph says, I'll do it. Please swear. And Israel bows to the head of the bed. And after this, then it gets sick. Now here's the question that our ancestors asked. All of this makes sense, except the bowing to the head of the bed. So imagine that we've all experienced this, we're all sick, right? Are you going to bow at the head of your bed? And if you're bowing, who are you bowing toward? Rashi of the 11th century, one of the great exegetes of Torah, when kids learn in school, often they are asked, what's bothering Rashi? And you go to Rashi and you start to unpack it. What Rashi wrote is this, that Israel bowed himself, Jacob bowed himself to the edge of the bed because he, the sick person, was turning toward Shekhinah. He was turning toward the divine presence. And from this, our ancestors inferred something rather extraordinary. That Shekhinah, from the Hebrew shochen, to dwell, the indwelling presence, what the teacher of my teachers called the local call. Not the long distance, far away God, but the sense of presence with a capital P, the sense of divinity, the sense of holiness that is in this world. That this Shekhinah and the light of the Shekhinah is above the head of each person who is sick. Which is extraordinary. Because it means, if that's true, that the sacred place is not the synagogue, although it is, check, or the Shabbos table, although it is, check, but the sickbed. The hospital, the sickbed, the operating suite. That those are sacred places. How could that be? How could that be? So Talmud tried to unpack that. How do we know that God sustains the sick? And they're looking for textual proof. In Psalms, it's written, God will succor, God will comfort that person on the sickbed. And they were good textualists, our ancestors. They looked at the text and they said, God will succor that one, protect that one on the sickbed, on the sickbed. So important was this idea in ancient days that it was taught the following. When you go to visit someone who's sick, and God willing, we'll be able to visit each other soon safely, we don't sit on the bed. We don't sit on a stool. We don't sit on a chair. We comport ourselves like that is sacred ground. Why? 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 Why would it be that we treat the sickbed with such reverence. It's not from fear. And it's not in supplication, although people do pray. I'm going to stop the share and take a second and check in again. Why might it be that we would treat the sickbed like a sacred place? I'd love to see some ideas in the chat box if you have one. I'm sure a number of us have been in hospitals. Hospitals are no place for sick people. You don't sleep very well. They poke you, they prod you. It's not pleasant. Nancy writes, healing is going on. Maybe so. Because God is with the sick person, writes Deborah. God willing so. Respect for the sick person. These are great, great responses. We realize the fragility of life, the sacred place for the infirm. Out of care. Let's go back to our friend, pretty boy, Yochanan. His experience of being sick transformed him in a way that opened his heart, opened his eyes, opened his hands, to the point that he could allow light from his arms to radiate for the sake of the sick. It wasn't like that before he was sick. Before he was sick, he was pretty boy. But now, having been ill, he was transformed. Same thing with Hezekiah. He turned to the wall and poured his heart out and felt a sense of presence. Yael writes, it's about vulnerability. Yes. And the imagined sense that the doors of heaven are open. Some of us believe that there's a heaven and that there's a door to heaven and that we pray and the prayers ascend and this is traditional language. And others of us are like, yeah, no, it doesn't work that way. Whether you are a mystic or a rationalist, for this one, it actually doesn't matter which. If you're a mystic, Shekhinah, the divine presence, is right there, and we treat it like it's the pillar of cloud, the pillar of fire, it's the burning bush, it's sacred ground. Yeah. What if it's not? What if it's not that way? The first name that Moses heard for God at the burning bush was not Elohim, El Shaddai. You're sending me back to Egypt. You're sending me back to the Klingons. They're going to ask, what is your name? Who is the one that says, send us out of here? Shlach et ami vaya'avduni. Let my people go that they will serve me. They're going to ask who you are. What's my name? What's your name? And we've all seen the Charlton Heston show, the movie, right? I am that I am. Terrible mistranslation. I will be what I will be. Ehyeh asher ehyeh. Becomingness. Transformation. But Yud-He Vav-He, God, is a God of becomingness, of change, of evolution, of transformation. That's literally the name that we associate with God in that tradition. Hezekiah was transformed. Jacob was transformed. Yochanan was transformed. The presence of Shekhinah is a presence of transformation. Anyone who's ever been touched by love, by care, by healing, by God is changed. And as God is a power of change and we are chips off the old block, so too we are changed. So I would humbly submit that that's the reason that we associate Shekhinah with the presence at every place of illness, also every place of birth, also every place of death. Divinity is about transformation. And so those places that are particularly powerful, potent for transformation, become portals for divinity. By the way, it's the same idea why you have a mezuzah on the door. Love Adonai with all your heart, with all your soul, with all you got. Put it on the doorposts of your rooms when you move from place to place, when you literally effectuate a change in where you are, so that we can effectuate a change in how we are. That we are to remember that God is the power of transformation. Didn't say cure. Healing, transformation, uplift. Give me your hand, lifting up. It's a very different understanding than the physicality of cure, which makes sense because back then cure was pretty difficult. We didn't have antibiotics, we didn't have ICUs, we didn't have physicians in quite the same way. So of course, we're going to look for something else. That idea is a very, very ancient idea. So ancient, in fact, that it goes to the very start of the Jewish tradition. In Genesis 17, Abraham, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the first patriarch, the first monotheist, he and his son Ishmael were circumcised. That's the brit, that's the covenant, that's the first physical connection. And the very next thing that happens, God appears to Abraham in the plains of Mamre. He sits at the tent door in the heat of day. So think. Women, bear with me a second. Gents, how you doing? Let's say hypothetically that you've been circumcised. Odds are pretty good you're not feeling so great right now. Ladies, if you've ever seen guys at a bris, odds are pretty good that many of them are crossing their legs or looking away. This is not the moment of fun. And this is the third day. So they didn't have antibiotics. They didn't have urologists. So now you're circumcising and you're not a baby. You're Abraham. You're in your 90s right now. Ouch. God appears to Abraham in the plains of Mamre. He sits at the tent door in the heat of day. What is this? This is the third day of Abraham's circumcision, and God is coming to pay a sick visit in Talmud. This, by the way, is the first time that we see somebody visiting the sick. And so often in our textual tradition, we, as the chips off the old block, try to emulate God. And so another piece of Talmud from Sota comes along and says, God clothed the naked like as Adam and Eve. Therefore, we have a mitzvah. We have a duty to clothe the naked. God visits the sick, just like for Abraham, and therefore so do we. Bikur cholim, the visiting of the sick, is a high mitzvah. And this is why. So far, so good. The next sentence in Genesis. Abraham lifts his eyes and he sees 3 men standing by. And suddenly this guy who was sitting there sort of nursing his now jumps up and runs from the tent door to meet them, and he bows down to the ground. Sound familiar? He's bowing down. Must be a sacred place. And if God is visiting, suddenly God is when you see this painting from the 1800s, hangs in the Jewish Museum in New York. Who are these 3? Talmud imagines those are angels. Michael is bringing news to Sarah that she's going to have a kiddo. Raphael, the angel of Rofeh, healing, to heal. And Gavriel, we have a little Sodom and Gomorrah thing to deal with. Now we've gone all the way. Now we've got beings of light that we call angels, one of them for healing, visiting Abraham in the book of Genesis. This is where I stop the screen share again and I check the temperatures in the room. Some of us are like, yeah, angels. And some of us are like, what? For those of us who believe in angels, yeah. For those of us that need another way in, ever brought somebody soup? According to Maimonides in Mishnah Torah, there are levels of angels, and the level number 10 out of 10 is called Ishim, literally people, or people-ish. That we actually are the conduit. We people are the conduit between the corporeal realm and the spiritual realm. We, us. Yochanan, give me your hand. Let me bring you soup. Let me pray for your healing. Let me call you. Let me let you not be alone. Some animals do that too. Ever seen the National Geographic special of elephants that hang out with each other when they're sick? Yeah. Yeah, that got people's attention. Yeah. How many of you have dogs and you know for darn sure that the dog knows you're not feeling well? I'm seeing some, yeah, absolutely. Somehow it's easier for us to talk about dogs and elephants than sometimes angels. Got it. Energy, consciousness, not alone. And if a dog can figure it out, can we? If we've suffered, maybe we're more attuned like Yochanan. So I want to invite you to close your eyes for a second, if it's comfortable. And whatever that vehicle for comfort, whether it is light, or a pet, or an ancestor, or hope, with each breath, bring that around you. And send it from your heart to someone or somewhere that calls for it for the sake of healing. Knowing that this connection is always there when you ask for it. I invite you to open your eyes, and if anyone felt anything, please throw some words in the chat box. I'm getting a few private messages. Love, faith, hope, a gentle hug, calmness, relief. One hears. I'll let you read the chat box. Here come the words. So here's the cool thing. If you're a rationalist and you don't believe any of this, it turns out the placebo effect is still real. They call it the placebo effect because it's still an effect. It still has an effect. And for those of us for whom this anchors an aspiration of faith, it turns out that this is hardwired in not just Jewish identity, but human identity. What we just did is Jewish in 3 seconds. We didn't need liturgy to do it. We'll add liturgy next time. I have no idea who you sent to, but in that moment for you, there was a sense of healing, comfort, purpose, presence. That is part of our existential Jewish story. So much so that we projected those onto God. That the journey of divinity with Abraham to visit was not just because God cares, but because one of the fractals of divine presence is that God is not ultimately independent of us. We see this at the sea. We've all seen the Charlton Heston movie. I'll go back to it. And Yul Brynner is sending all the Egyptians across, and the Jews, the Israelites, make it across and swamped all the Egyptians, and everybody goes, yay, we made it, we're free now. And in Talmud, the angels went and started to sing praises to God, and God rebuked them, saying, the works of my hands are drowning in the sea, and you angels are singing me praises. God actually feels. This understanding of divinity may be a little anthropocentric, a little, too human for human comfort. But again, our ancestors were straining to find language. And so they imagined a divinity that feels when we feel and hurts when we hurt. And some of you are going to say, hey, that sounds Christian. But actually, it was Jewish first. This Shekhinah that hovers over the sickbed, in Talmud, when somebody suffers, what does Shekhinah say? My head is heavy. My arm is heavy. And if the Holy Blessed One of God suffers over the blood of the, quote, wicked, Kal v'chomer, all the more so for the blood of the righteous, for those of us who suffer. So much so that the rabbi of the Warsaw Ghetto, and if anybody has liberty, license to say this, it's going to be him, Kalman Kalanimus Shapira of the Piasetzna, the rabbi of the Warsaw Ghetto, said this: you think you suffer? You think it's bad for you behind the walls of the Warsaw Ghetto? You think it's bad for you in Black Death? As much as you're suffering, God suffers even more. As it is said in the book of Isaiah, in all their troubles, God was troubled. Hundreds of years before the modern era began, the prophet Isaiah imagined that God suffered, heard the sense that God is suffering with us, not separate from us, but with us. That God is not subject to limitation. That's monotheism. So God's suffering, therefore, also must be boundless. It's impossible for us even to imagine what this kind of suffering must be. If the world even heard God weeping and realized the extent of God's grief, the world would explode. And so God is imagined to take a step back, to be concealed, to be mistar. Does God actually cry? Does God have tears? Does God use Kleenex? It's not the point. I believe that the reason the Piasetzner wrote this was not about theology, because we're never going to know. Rather, it was about conditioning the human heart to have empathy. As bad as it is behind the walls, as bad as it is in the sickbed, and it's real, the Jewish path is to find empathy for each other, and dare we say even for God. What a mess this world is. Look how many people are sick. A God that doesn't feel with us isn't worth much. So surely it must be that God, this is the Piasetzner talking now, must be feeling with us. That's a God that I can pray to. That's a God that I could bring around me. I could even imagine comforting God as God comforts me. And the mystics would say that that is the definition of prayer. Whether your God is a God of comfort or presence or light, or the doctor's antibiotics, or the liquid nitrogen that's taking care of the vaccines heading to us, all of those are very Jewish ideas. And that's what we're going to bring to our next session. I know we're very close to time. Next week, we're going to go from theology and angels and light to saying Amisha Berach. When we pray, what are we praying for? And who are we praying to? And what's that like? And what do these words really mean? And is it about words? We pray. We're people of a book. Why do we have these prayers? And the following session will be about the angels of healing. And a couple of you have written to me already and said, I wear this healing amulet. What's that? A necklace that I have for my blank. And is that Jewish? And a couple people have written about name changes and other mystical practices that Jewish tradition, and I don't mean the woo-woo stuff, I mean Orthodox, in the back of the book, have always had on hand, and practices that Jews undertake all the time and have for centuries. We're going to look at those in the wake of what we have been doing here. I look forward to continuing our journey. I'll stay on for a little while to hang out. And I invite your questions and comments, especially if it's in the chat box, because I know that there are many, many of us on screen right now. I'm getting some thank yous, electricity around me. It's not easy stuff. Thank you, everybody. And for those of us who are suffering, for those of us who have loved ones who are suffering, I want to invite us to send not just to the sick, but to the people whose hearts are heavy with worry, grief, the same love and light that we brought a minute ago, so that we know that none of us ultimately is alone. The light of our arms can shine in that darkness, and by that merit may we be lifted and healed. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'll stay on.